This is The Quiet End, and tonight I'll tell you a story titled Tracks to Oblivion. Let's begin. Yuji had always been drawn to the forbidden corners of reality, to the spaces where fact and folklore intertwined. For weeks, he'd burrowed through obscure forums and faded newspaper clippings, piecing together the legend of Kisaragi Station. An unmarked stop on the Odaku line, it didn't appear on any map or official record. Just whispers and half-forgotten dreams among those who claimed to have seen it. Their stories were fragmented, faces pale with something they dared not remember. One survivor spoke of fog choking the air as the train doors slid open. Another recalled an inexplicable hum, soft at first, but growing louder until it became a relentless dirge. The common thread was a warning: do not search for Kisaragi. It finds you, and once it does, the path back is not your own. But Yuji dismissed their cryptic warnings as exaggerations, trauma-fueled nonsense. The idea that an urban legend could fuel his academic thesis was too enticing to ignore. Sitting in his cramped apartment, the dim glow of his laptop reflected off his glasses as he typed, "Journey to Kisaragi, untangling the myth of the misplaced station." He hit enter. Schedules, coordinates, eyewitness reports, they all led to a single conclusion, or so he convinced himself. There was a train, a night train, at precisely 2:12 a.m., rumored to align with sightings of Kisaragi. Yuji leaned back in his chair, triumphant. Tomorrow, he would take that train. Tomorrow, he'd prove them all wrong. Or so the night seemed to whisper, as the shadows cast strange shapes on his walls. The train arrived precisely at 2:12 a.m., its headlights piercing the dense haze of the sleeping city. Yuji stepped aboard, clutching his notebook filled with frantic scrawls and highlighted forum posts. The car was nearly empty, save for a disheveled man muttering to himself in the corner. Yuji ignored him, taking a seat by the window. At first, the journey was uneventful, the train gliding smoothly along the tracks. The familiar stops of the Odaku line passed in quick succession: Machida, Sagamiono, Abina. But then, something shifted. The train didn't slow for Atsugi. Instead, it hurtled forward, its pace growing unnervingly fast. Yuji glanced at the map above the door. The blinking light that marked their location was no longer moving. It simply flickered and died. Outside, the city lights gave way to endless shadow. The hum of the engine took on an unnatural cadence, rising and falling like a voice just beneath hearing, speaking words Yuji couldn't understand. He pressed his ear to the window instinctively, but the glass was icy cold, stinging his skin. The disheveled man suddenly stood and stumbled toward the door. "Don't get off," he rasped, his bloodshot eyes locking onto Yuji. "No matter what you see, stay seated. It's not for you." But before Yuji could respond, the man yanked open the emergency door release and threw himself into the void. The train shuddered violently, then jolted to a stop. A voice crackled over the intercom, garbled, distorted, yet unmistakable. "Kisaragi." Yuji looked out the window, his breath hitching. The platform was bathed in pale, sickly light, illuminating no nameplate nor exit, only an empty expanse that seemed to stretch forever. He had arrived. Yuji stepped off the train and onto the platform. It was dead silent. No distant rumble of departing trains, no muffled announcements over a PA system. Just the oppressive stillness of a place abandoned by time. He moved cautiously toward the ticket booth, its glass shattered inward as if breached from the outside. The turnstiles, coated in a thin veneer of rust, stood crooked, their mechanisms twisted and corroded. He reached for his phone, instinctively hoping the reassuring glow of the screen would tether him to some semblance of reality. But the signal bars ghosted away, replaced by an ominous no-service icon. He dialed a friend anyway, but all that answered him was static laced with faint, wet syllables. He froze. Was that someone speaking? Yuji. His name was there, whispered on the currents of distortion. Swallowing back unease, he glanced behind him. Shadows sprawled across the platform unnaturally, their edges sharp and elongated, twisting as though cast by an unseen light source. They didn't match his own movements. When he turned, they stayed still. The air felt alive, thick, suffocating, and laced with the unmistakable weight of observation. It prickled the hairs on his neck. There were no eyes to see, yet he knew something unseen was watching. Desperation clawed at him, his breath hitching. Maybe he should just board the train again and leave. But as he turned toward it, the cabin lights inside blinked once, then extinguished. The train was now a wall of shadow, devoid of refuge. Yuji whispered to himself, "Just the wind, just my nerves," but the words rang hollow. Something here had a pulse, and it wasn't his own. Yuji's feet carried him beyond the station, though every instinct screamed to turn back. The air grew colder as he stepped onto a street torn apart by time. Cracks spiderwebbed across the pavement, jagged fractures leading into yawning gaps. The buildings, their steel and concrete warped as if softened and squeezed by an unseen hand, leaned at impossible angles, their windows gaping like empty sockets. Overhead, the sky churned. Dark clouds swirled and pulsed rhythmically, almost as if they were breathing. A faint light on the horizon spiraled inward, collapsing into itself before flickering out entirely. Yuji blinked hard, trying to convince himself that the shifting horizon was an illusion, a trick of his exhausted mind. But as he pushed forward, his sense of the familiar became an unnerving spiral. A postal box he swore he'd passed reappeared on a completely different corner. A convenience store with its neon sign still flickering loomed ahead, only to seemingly slither back behind him moments later, as if the town itself were rearranging. He slowed to a stop, shivering. He was not in control of direction anymore. The town was. From behind a shadowed alley, a figure emerged. The man was dressed in filthy clothes, his face gaunt and hollow-eyed. He shuffled forward, his steps uneven, like a marionette struggling to move under tangled strings. "You shouldn't be here," the man whispered, his voice high-pitched and cracked, each word trembling like an unraveling thread. "It knows you've come. It knows you're curious." Yuji hesitated. "What is it? The station? This place? What are you talking about?" The man's lips curled into a grin that lacked any warmth. "You don't leave. Not once it notices, and it always notices. The streets forget, the buildings lie, but it never lies." Before Yuji could ask more, the man backed away, retreating into the shadows, dissolving as if swallowed whole by the breathing town. Yuji stood in the stillness, his breath fogging the cold, heavy air. Somewhere in the distance, a sound like grinding metal echoed, a low, resonant growl. Yuji turned back toward the station, or at least, where he thought the station had been. The streets warped beneath his feet, twisting subtly as if the ground itself was breathing, shifting with each step he took. The convenience store he'd passed earlier was now on the wrong side of the intersection, the flickering neon stuttering erratically before winking out entirely. He broke into a brisk jog, his pulse quickening. The silence had become unbearable, heavy enough to make his thoughts feel sluggish. Every now and then he'd glance at his watch, desperate for some tangible consistency. But the second hand twitched backward, each tick undoing the last. He cursed and pocketed it, refusing to look again. Reaching for his notebook for some sense of anchor, his hand trembled. When he opened it, the pages were blank. No handwriting, no notes, just an endless smear of black ink that reeked faintly of iron. Panic clutched at his chest as he threw it down, only to realize that his bag, his belongings, now felt foreign. He unzipped the satchel and flinched. Where his carefully packed items had been, there were now objects he didn't recognize. Cracked pocket mirrors, rusted coins, a brittle feather blackened at its edge. Above, the darkened sky pulsed like some immense, slumbering heart. The whispers began as a faint vibration just beyond the edge of understanding. They grew louder, clustering into feverish tendrils of sound writhing just beneath comprehension. Then a single word rose from their maddening chorus, clear and deliberate: Oblivion. Yuji spun in place, searching the empty streets. The word reverberated, not spoken by any tongue, but carved into reality itself. It quaked through his bones. His knees buckled slightly under the weight of an unseen force. The shadows around him disconnected altogether from the weak light. They moved with intent, circling close, growing sharp at their edges. His throat tightened. It wasn't the town that had rearranged itself. It was the world. Yuji staggered back to the station, or whatever it had now become. The once cracked platform warped into impossible angles, stairs spiraling into the sky, only to fold back into themselves. Pillars stretched higher than they should, vibrating faintly, as though they were struggling to retain their form. Lines that had once been solid now shimmered and bent, refusing to obey the laws of geometry. The air, heavy and electric, buzzed with a resonance that threatened to break his mind. The shadows moved unnaturally here too, pooling like ink around the figure waiting on the platform. Yuji froze. The being was tall, unnervingly still, its elongated form cloaked in a tattered, flowing garment. Its face, or what should have been a face, was hidden behind a cracked, featureless mask. The fissures on the surface glowed faintly, faint threads of light leaking through like veins under translucent skin. The figure spoke without moving, its voice hollow and layered, as though a chorus of unseen mouths articulated its words. "You have come far, Yuji, unwise but inevitable." Yuji's voice cracked under the weight of his terror. "What is this place? What are you?" "I am the conductor," it replied. "This realm, this station, is neither here nor there. It is threshold. It is hunger. Kisaragi feeds on those with minds too fragile to stay away. Your kind, the curious, the restless." Yuji's breath hitched, his mouth dry. "You're saying this place is alive?" The mask tilted slightly, the faint threads of light twisting like they were pulsating beneath the fractures. "Alive is insufficient. It waits, and when souls like yours wander too close, it devours. Curiosity nurtures it, sustains it. Return was never an option, but perhaps in your final moments, it will grant understanding rather than oblivion. A rare privilege." The platform beneath Yuji's feet groaned like a dying beast, shifting chaotically as the shadows thickened. The conductor extended its hand, its fingers too long and jointed in places they shouldn't be, beckoning him closer. "Come, witness what lies beyond." The conductor's hand remained outstretched, its too long fingers unmoving. "Make your choice, child of flesh," it intoned. "Step forward and I will unravel the veil, or return to where you began, empty of this place, devoid of memory and safe, until curiosity brings you again." Yuji hesitated, his mind a cacophony of voices, none of them his own. Stay? Witness the truth? Or leave and lose not just the station, but the very thread of this maddening experience? The pulsating platform beneath his feet felt as though it were waiting for his answer. I just want to leave," he managed, his voice trembling. "Erase everything. I don't want this anymore." The conductor's mask shifted, the glowing veins beneath it writhing. For a moment, Yuji thought he heard something resembling laughter, a sound like grinding metal on stone. "As you wish," it said, stepping aside. The train, its lights flickering like a distant star on the verge of collapse, screeched into view once more. The door hissed open with a faint, guttural sound. Yuji stepped inside, taking one last look at the warped station, at the impossible figure, before the door slammed shut behind him. The cabin was empty, its seats vacant. His heart pounded as he sank into a seat near the window, desperate to leave this nightmare behind. The train jolted forward, its mechanisms groaning like something in pain, and soon it was moving. Or so it seemed. Yuji turned toward the window, clinging to the hope of seeing streets, lights, anything familiar. But the landscape outside didn't move. It was static, frozen, an endless gray void, as if the train were barreling through a painting that refused to change. It was then he saw his reflection. He expected his own haggard face staring back, but what met his gaze wasn't him, it was something else. The figure in the glass was impossibly gaunt, its eyes black pits bleeding faint trails of light. Its smile was wide, cruel, and unrelenting. Yuji recoiled, but the reflection mirrored him perfectly, except for that unending grin. The whispers returned, faint but growing, curling through the static like vines. The train rattled violently, its hum no longer mechanical. It was alive, and it carried him toward something he couldn't comprehend. Yuji wanted to scream, but the reflection spoke first. "Oblivion," it whispered, the word pressing against him, crushing him in its weight. The train moved, but Yuji knew he was going nowhere. Yuji jolted awake in his dorm room, drenched in cold sweat. The sunlight filtering through the blinds felt wrong, too sharp yet too dim. He sat up quickly, his breath shallow, his head pounding as if something heavy rested behind his eyes. Relief washed over him for a fleeting moment. It was over? Or was it? The room around him flickered, faintly at first, like the unstable frame of an old film strip. When he glanced at his desk, his laptop glowed faintly. Drawn by some dark compulsion, he swung his legs to the floor and approached it. The screen was already on, his thesis paper open. The title read, Journey to Kisaragi, Untangling the Myth of the Misplaced Station. His heart froze. The paper was complete, each page meticulously written, dense with citations and conclusions he didn't recognize. He scrolled to the end, his hand trembling on the trackpad. The final line leapt out at him, stark and damning. Kisaragi Station accepts all who seek it. Yuji stumbled back, his eyes darting to the door. He reached for it, but his breath caught in his throat as his reflection in the doorknob twisted unnaturally, its expression an unfathomable sneer. From outside, muted voices muffled by the walls carried faint conversations. But when he pressed his ear to the door, the words blurred, unintelligible, like someone mumbling in reverse. He turned sharply to the window, desperate to ground himself. The people below walked in slow, jerking movements, their faces blurred, smudging into nothingness the longer he stared. Lights flickered across the horizon and then faded entirely as if consumed by the sky itself. The whispers returned. They surged, a crashing tide of voices, louder than ever. Oblivion. His walls trembled. Cracks snaked through the plaster, glowing faintly with a sickly light that seeped out in steady pulses. The space dissolved around him, the solid edges vanishing like sand washed away by the tide. Beyond them was the infinite, yawning platform of Kisaragi Station, waiting, its geometry writhing. Yuji sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The cracks widened, the room evaporating piece by piece. The whispers surrounded him, no longer external. They were inside now, threading through his veins, through the marrow of his bones. As the platform swallowed him whole, one thought rang clear, his final tether to reason. There was never a way back. So tell me, dear listener, if curiosity is the ticket to Kisaragi Station, how close are you to boarding yourself? Subscribe for more chilling tales, and hit the bell to stay in the dark. See you at the next quiet end.